Right now, a jury of 9 everyday people in Oakland, they hold the fate of, like, the most advanced technology in human history right in their hands.
Yeah, the weight of that is just staggering.
It really is. But, while Elon Musk and Sam Altman are fighting bitterly over the quote-unquote soul of artificial intelligence in this highly publicized courtroom spectacle, a major Fortune 500 consulting firm just quietly handed over 30,000 human jobs to an autonomous algorithm.
Right under everyone's noses, yeah.
Exactly. So welcome to the deep dive. If you're listening to this because you want the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed, without drowning in the daily flood of information overload, you are in the perfect place.
Absolutely.
Today, we are exploring this massive thematic split happening in the tech world. And our roadmap for this is the Tech Reader AI Digest for Thursday, May 14th, 2026. It's put together by technology writer and software engineer Aaron Rose.
And I just have to say, it is a phenomenal digest to work from because Rose, he sits directly at that intersection of boardroom strategy and actual software engineering.
Right, he actually builds this stuff.
Exactly. He isn't just analyzing the legal drama from the outside. He's looking at how these companies are fundamentally altering the daily workflows of millions of people.
And that dual perspective, that's exactly our mission today. We're going to examine the stark contrast between this high-drama, billionaire fight for absolute control of AI on one hand.
Which is everywhere in the news right now.
Right. And then on the other hand, the quiet, completely ruthless way that technology is being woven into the background of our phones, our coding environments, and just the massive corporate structures of the global economy.
The stuff that actually impacts, the real world.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the spectacle.
Yeah.
The landmark Musk versus Altman trial in Oakland, California, it's finally reached closing arguments.
It's been quite the ride.
Definitely. But before we break down the legal maneuvering, we need to do a quick neutrality check. For you listening, we are dealing with highly polarizing figures here, massive egos, and literally billions of dollars.
Very true.
So our goal today is strictly to look impartially at the legal and factual claims presented in the source material. We are not taking sides at all. We are simply analyzing the mechanics of the arguments.
And the mechanics are, they're fascinating.
Right, so looking at those mechanics, Musk's team had to close this out. How did they structure their final pitch to the jury?
So Musk's attorney, Stephen Mullo, he made this really fascinating high-stakes gamble in his closing argument. Rather than leaning purely into, complex contract law, he staked the entire prosecution on a single human vulnerability.
Which was?
Sam Altman's personal credibility.
Wow. Just going right for the person.
Yeah, Mullo literally stood up in front of the jury and framed the entire verdict around whether Altman could be trusted. His framing was incredibly blunt. He explicitly told the jury, and this is a quote, "If you cannot trust him, they cannot win."
That is a massive bet.
It is. And to drive that home, he meticulously reminded the jury of 5 separate witnesses who had previously challenged Altman's credibility under oath during the trial.
5 witnesses.
5. He really hammered that point.
I am looking at this like a messy divorce where one side is fighting over a verbal promise about who gets the dog. Except in this case, the dog is artificial general intelligence.
That's a very expensive dog.
Right. Or AGI, which, just to define it for you listening, it's an AI system that equals or exceeds human capabilities across all economically valuable work.
Right.
So Mullo is essentially pointing at Altman and saying, look at this guy's track record. You simply can't trust him to keep his word regarding the original mission of the company.
And that analogy tracks perfectly with the legal strategy. It's an intentional character assessment, and he's doing it to overcome a massive structural weakness in Musk's case.
Because verbal agreements are so flimsy.
Exactly. In corporate law, especially when you are dealing with assets of this magnitude, verbal agreements are notoriously difficult to enforce. And OpenAI's defense team, they knew exactly how to counterattack that specific weakness.
What did they do?
They bypassed the whole philosophical debate entirely. They just zeroed in on the complete absence of a paper trail.
Because the burden of proof is on the prosecution, right?
Yep. And OpenAI's lawyers highlighted that despite all of Musk's grand claims about founding principles, he failed to produce a single written contract.
Not even one.
Not one. There is no documentation proving that his initial funding of OpenAI came with perpetual, legally binding non-profit strings attached.
Wow. And in the eyes of the law, particularly when dealing with the formation of a charitable trust, that has to be a fatal omission. You don't just accidentally forget to draft the foundational documents of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise.
You really don't. But the defense didn't just point to the missing paperwork. They weaponized Musk's own witness list against him.
Oh, this is the part about Siobhan Zealous, right?
Exactly. So she is an executive at Neuralink, and she is also Musk's romantic partner. She was actually called to the stand by Musk's team.
Which you'd think would help his case.
You would think. But the defense highlighted to the jury that even she could not corroborate his claims of a formal charitable trust.
Ouch. When you cannot get your closest allies to confirm the existence of the core agreement that your entire lawsuit is based on, your evidentiary foundation is pretty much crumbling.
Completely crumbling. And that is when OpenAI went in for the knockout punch regarding motive. They didn't mince words about why they believe Musk is actually suing.
What did they tell a jury?
They said he wanted dominion over AGI. Mr. Musk wanted total control.
Dominion, that is a strong word.
Very strong. And it completely reframes the narrative for the jury. It shifts the perception of Musk from, an aggrieved philanthropist trying to protect humanity to a frustrated competitor who realized he lost control of the most valuable technological asset in history.
And Molo, Musk's attorney, he tried to fight that specific narrative shift, didn't he? And he kind of overplayed his hand.
He really did. He attempted to suggest to the jury that Musk wasn't pursuing this case for the money.
But Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers shut that down instantly, right?
Oh, yeah. She delivered a severe rebuke. She forced Molo to formally retract that statement right in front of the jury.
That's embarrassing.
Highly embarrassing. She explicitly reminded the court that Musk's own legal filing is seeking billions of dollars in disgorgement.
Wait, disgorgement. Can you break that down?
Yeah, disgorgement isn't just a penalty. It is a legal remedy requiring a party to give up profits they allegedly made improperly or illegally.
Got it.
So you cannot stand in front of a judge and claim it isn't about the money when your actual legal filing demands billions.
Right. The math doesn't add up. So the jury is deliberating on all of this right now. But Aaron Rose points out something deeply insightful in his digest. He says the actual verdict of this trial almost doesn't matter compared to what it took to get to this point.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the enduring legacy of this trial won't be the jury's decision on a theoretical oral contract. It's going to be the discovery phase.
Oh, the discovery phase. Airing of dirty laundry.
Exactly. This lawsuit was initially positioned as this high-minded philosophical debate over the soul and safety of AI, but instead it just devolved into a bitter, incredibly revealing contract dispute.
And in the process, the internal documentary record of OpenAI was cracked wide open.
Wide open.
I see where this is going, because OpenAI is currently gearing up for what the industry expects to be the largest IPO in tech history.
Right.
And when a company goes public, they're required by the SEC to file an S-1 document. That document isn't just a marketing brochure. It is a legally binding disclosure of every internal risk, every structural flaw, and financial reality the company faces.
And because of the discovery phase in this trial, all of that internal dysfunction, the emails, the texts, the power struggles, it's now part of the public record.
So they can't hide it.
Exactly. It forces their hand. The impending S-1 disclosures will have to explicitly address the chaos unearthed during this trial to future board members and institutional investors.
That is permanent reputational damage.
And structural damage, stuff that was originally supposed to remain a closely guarded trade secret.
It's wild. But, this courtroom chaos isn't just about billionaire egos. It is a massive distraction from the actual technological land grab happening right now.
Yes, the real action is elsewhere.
Right. While everyone is watching the trial, the actual AI models are quietly slipping into our pockets and fundamentally changing how we physically interact with software.
It's a huge shift.
Let's look at the second major story from the digest. OpenAI just fundamentally changed the ergonomics of coding. They rolled out remote codex access directly into the ChatGPT mobile app for iOS and Android.
We are talking about their latest Codex class model available right on a smartphone.
Which is kind of mind-blowing.
It completely breaks the traditional physical tether between the developer and their workstation. Let's walk through the mechanics of how this functions.
Please do.
Imagine you are a software engineer. You have a massive production-scale refactoring job, which means rewriting a huge, complex chunk of existing code to make it more efficient. Or perhaps you need the AI to generate a comprehensive suite of software tests.
Heavy-duty stuff.
Right. Historically, you would initiate that heavy process on your desktop, and you would be forced to just sit there. You'd monitor the terminal output, waiting to see if the process breaks, hits an error, or gets stuck in a loop.
It's the classic developer excuse of, my code is compiling so I can go get a coffee, but you can't actually leave the building because you have to babysit the machine.
Exactly. But with this new rollout, developers can kick off that heavy job on their Mac host machine and then simply walk away. The AI model is doing the heavy lifting asynchronously in the background.
And if it gets stuck,
That's the brilliant part of the mechanism. When the model hits a roadblock or requires human approval to proceed to a sensitive next step, it pings your phone via the ChatGPT app.
like a text message from your code.
Basically, you open the app, review the terminal output, check the diffs, which are the line-by-line differences between the old code and the new code, and you can literally approve the actions remotely from the grocery store.
The workflow becomes entirely fluid.
Completely fluid.
I do have a major pushback here, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Letting an AI code your company's proprietary software while you're away from your desk feels a bit like leaving a toddler alone in a white room with a box of permanent markers.
I love that analogy.
Right, like it might draw a masterpiece, but it's more likely to ruin the walls. How does OpenAI stop the model from hallucinating, wiping a database, and just messing everything up while the developer isn't actively watching the screen?
It is a totally valid concern. It's the most critical vulnerability of asynchronous AI. And OpenAI built a specific software mechanism to address it, called hooks.
Hooks.
Yeah, hooks allow developers to write custom middleware scripts that automatically intercept and block certain prompts or actions before the AI can execute them.
So if we stick with the toddler metaphor, the hooks are essentially digital baby gates.
Yes.
The toddler can run around and draw in the designated play area, but the moment they try to open the door to the kitchen, or in this case, the production database, the baby gate stops them and sends a notification to the parent's phone asking for a passcode.
That perfectly illustrates the mechanism. The AI cannot execute a high-risk command without your explicit manual approval from your mobile device. But there is a secondary economic layer to this that is equally important.
Economics. How so?
The digest specifically notes that this workflow helps stop hallucinating models in their tracks, which saves massive compute costs and reduces unnecessary token usage.
Oh, let me deduce the math on that.
Yeah.
When an AI hallucination happens in a coding environment, it doesn't just write a bad line of code and stop.
Barely.
It often gets caught in an infinite loop, continuously generating useless text as it attempts to fix its own errors. And every single word or token that the AI generates requires server processing power.
Which is incredibly expensive.
Exactly. That compute power is finite.
And timing is everything in the tech industry. Aaron Rose highlights a crucial deadline in the digest. GitHub Copilot, which is OpenAI's massive competitor in the coding space, is switching to a strict token-based billing model on June 1st.
Wow, so we are only weeks away from that shift.
Right. Suddenly, every engineering department in the world is going to be hyper-aware of exactly how many tokens their AI tools are burning through.
So by allowing developers to instantly interrupt the runaway looping model right from their phone, OpenAI is providing a tool that actively manages and limits the compute costs of those workflows.
It's a huge competitive advantage.
So what does this all mean for the listener who isn't a software engineer? Like, why should we care about a mobile coding app?
Because it validates Aaron Rose's core thesis on the direction of the entire tech industry. The battle to win market share is no longer simply about having the absolute smartest AI model on a standardized benchmark test.
What's the new battleground?
The war is now being fought over who can provide the least annoying workflow. OpenAI is taking software development from being a rigidly desktop-bound synchronous chore and transforming it into an asynchronous continuous background process.
So the AI ceases to be a tool you operate manually and becomes a colleague you occasionally text with to approve their work.
Perfectly said.
And, that thematic shift from manual tools to autonomous colleagues perfectly bridges us to the final story. Because while OpenAI is heavily focused on optimizing the workflow of the individual developer, their biggest rival, Anthropic, is completely bypassing the individual.
They're playing a very different game.
Right. They are going straight to the top of the corporate food chain and locking down the boardroom. PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, one of the massive Big Four consulting firms, just announced a sweeping enterprise-wide expansion of their alliance with Anthropic.
It's massive.
They're committing to train 30,000 U.S. professionals specifically on Claude models.
The sheer scale of that deployment is staggering. But the mechanics of what they are deploying are what truly matter.
Here's where it gets really interesting. PwC is not just buying 30,000 basic chatbot licenses so their consultants can write faster emails.
No, not at all.
They are rolling out Claude Code and Claude Cowork for what they explicitly call agentic technology builds. We need to clarify how an agentic system functions differently than a standard AI.
Yeah, let's break that down. A standard AI chatbot is reactive. You ask a question, it generates text, and it stops.
It waits for you.
Right. An agentic AI is proactive and autonomous. It is given a high-level goal, and it has the capability to navigate user interfaces, query legacy databases, write migration scripts, and execute actions across different software systems without requiring step-by-step human prompting.
It acts as an independent software agent.
Exactly.
And PwC provided real-world proof in the digest of what happens when you deploy 30,000 of these agents across a global consulting firm. They cited a stalled HR transformation project.
A classic consulting nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. In the legacy consulting world, unsticking a massive corporate HR integration could take multiple quarters or even years of mapping systems and writing code.
Easily.
But using Claude, PwC pushed that stalled project to a live functional application in under 2 months.
That speed is unheard of. And they also detailed a massive shift in cybersecurity. PwC claims their incident response times, the critical window where a threat is identified and triaged, has been slashed from hours to mere minutes.
Minutes? That's incredible.
Yeah, they are using agentic vulnerability operation.
Okay, let's explain that mechanism. Because instead of a human IT team getting an alert, opening a dashboard, hunting through server logs to find the vulnerability, and writing a patch, the agentic AI receives the alert, autonomously navigates the logs, identifies the specific malicious code, and writes the patch itself in minutes.
The AI is hunting the threats and building the responses simultaneously.
The metaphor that comes to mind is the difference between hiring an architect to draw you a complex blueprint of a house and hiring a swarm of robotic bees that actually fly out and build the house for you while you sleep.
Swarm of robotic bees, that's a great image.
Legacy consulting was the blueprint. But if the agentic AI is doing the vulnerability triage in minutes and building the HR applications in a few weeks, what are the 30,000 human consultants actually doing?
What's fascinating here is it forces a complete reevaluation of what a legacy consulting firm actually sells to a client. For decades, the Big Four model was fundamentally based on selling human hours to produce massive 200-page PowerPoint slide decks.
Right. You hired them to analyze your business and tell you what to do.
And they handed you an astronomical invoice for the privilege of reading that slide deck.
Oh yeah, astronomical.
But that entire structural model is collapsing. PwC is pivoting away from selling slide decks. They are now selling forward-deployed AI.
Forward-deployed AI.
Yes. Those 30,000 human consultants are effectively evolving into AI managers. Their job is no longer to write the code or analyze the logs. Their job is to deploy, monitor, and steer these agentic AI frameworks deeply into their clients' businesses.
It seems like Anthropic is treating this like a ruthless enterprise land grab.
They absolutely are.
Aaron Rose's digest points out that Anthropic is aggressively securing these broad, top-down institutional mandates. They just announced the massive RAMP crossover event yesterday, and now this PwC deal.
It's all about momentum.
Right. When a globally recognized firm like PwC standardizes 30,000 seats on your specific agentic framework, it generates an immense amount of social proof.
It sends a blindingly bright market signal to every other Fortune 500 company evaluating their tech stack. Think about it. If you are a chief information officer trying to figure out which AI to integrate, and you see PwC bet their entire operational framework on Claude, that heavily influences your buying decision.
You want what they're using. And it completely overshadows the older narratives in the industry. For instance, Google Cloud has been trying to secure market dominance by relying on hardware narrative deals, like their recent A4X Max infrastructure agreement with thinking machines.
Which is very traditional.
Very. But Anthropic is bypassing the hardware layer entirely and embedding itself directly into the actual labor force. They aren't just selling cloud storage. They're positioning Claude as the default operating system for enterprise work.
The contrast between the strategies is just stark. And Anthropic's approach creates a much stickier product ecosystem for these massive corporations. Once you build your labor force around an AI, you don't easily swap it out.
Exactly. So let's pull all of these threads together, because the journey we have taken today perfectly illustrates the thematic split Aaron Rose highlighted.
It really does.
We started in a courtroom in Oakland, analyzing a bitterly personal, high-drama legal fight over the soul and the ultimate control of AGI. We saw how the sheer desire for dominion and the subsequent legal discovery process cracked open the internal secrets of OpenAI.
Right, threatening permanent damage to their upcoming IPO through those S1 disclosures.
Yeah. And from that spectacle of control, we transitioned to the practical realities of how the technology operates today. We examined how OpenAI is fundamentally shifting the ergonomics of software development.
Untethering developers from their desks.
Exactly. Utilizing hooks and mobile interfaces to turn code generation into a continuous asynchronous background process that actively manages compute costs.
And finally, we zoomed out to the macroeconomic scale. We watched a massive consulting firm deploy thousands of autonomous AI agents, structurally changing the very nature of corporate labor.
We are witnessing the shift from human-generated slide decks to forward-deployed AI execution engines.
So, the essential takeaway for you listening is to recognize the through line connecting these events. AI is rapidly transitioning.
It's not just a toy anymore.
No, it is no longer a novelty chatbot interface. And it is no longer just a theoretical future we debate about. It is actively becoming a deeply embedded, invisible infrastructure.
The silent plumbing, really.
Yes, it is the silent plumbing that powers the applications you use, the workflows you rely on, and the corporate entities you interact with every single day.
It is fading into the background, which is exactly the hallmark of every truly revolutionary technology. Once it becomes invisible, it becomes indispensable.
Indispensable. And this raises an important question, one that pushes beyond everything we have discussed today.
I'm intrigued. What is it?
Well, we are clearly moving toward a global economy run by these asynchronous agentic workflows, right? We have models operating independently in the background, making corporate decisions, triaging security, and building software infrastructure.
Right, the swarm of bees building the house on their own.
Exactly. So if Anthropic's Claude and OpenAI's enterprise models are essentially becoming the autonomous operating systems for the Fortune 500, what happens when two competing agentic corporate systems have a disagreement over a multi-million-dollar supply chain contract?
Oh, wow.
Right. If the AI is negotiating the terms and the AI is executing the deliverables, how does a purely algorithmic dispute get resolved? Do they hire AI lawyers to litigate against each other at light speed?
That is a wildly complex, entirely new paradigm to think about. When the invisible infrastructure starts fighting with itself, who actually holds the gavel?
That's the million-dollar question.
It really is. That is exactly the kind of question we need to be asking and why we do this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. For you listening, keep questioning the flashy headlines, look closely at the invisible workflows being built behind the drama, and we will catch you on the next one.